All right, guys, so I've gotten a couple questions about number 6 and 7 on 1A, on the worksheet 1A, and it's about how the spheres interact. Now, here's the deal. We learned about the geosphere, which is all land, and here's the geosphere, this dirt right here. We learned about the biosphere. I can be a part of the biosphere. This tree right here is a part of the biosphere. This plant right here is a part of the biosphere. And we talked about the atmosphere, and that's the sky right up there. There's the atmosphere right up there. That's the atmosphere. We also talked about the hydrosphere, and that's all water. Now, it's not raining right now, it's dry, but the water can also be felt in the air as humidity. There's water in the air. When it's really humid outside, you can feel that water, or when it's raining, you can see that water. Now, here's the thing. On your quiz, what's going to be, it's going to ask you about how the spheres interact, how they work together. That's the thing, that the spheres aren't just independent things. They all work together. Here's an example. This tree right here, this big tree right here, this is a part of the biosphere, but it depends on the geosphere. The geosphere feeds the tree nutrients, but the tree also gives back to the geosphere. The roots of the tree help the soil stay together, but here's another way. When the leaves of the tree fall down and they break down, they help give nutrients back into the soil. It's a relationship that works together. Now we could tie in the atmosphere there as well, because when the tree is swaying there in the breeze, when the leaves are swaying there in the breeze, those leaves are part of photosynthesis, where they take in carbon dioxide and they put out oxygen. There's a connection between the atmosphere, the biosphere, and the geosphere. All three work together. And now we can put the hydrosphere in there, because without water, all of these things would die as well. So we need to have the water go into the geosphere to help the nutrients, to help the tree, and to help the tree grow and thrive and survive. And there we have the hydrosphere. But the tree also, I forget exactly what the biology term is, but the tree also evaporates water off, and it puts water into the atmosphere. So not only does it take it out, but it also puts it back into the whole system. So everything works together. And that's the big thing that we've been talking about. The geosphere, the atmosphere, the biosphere, the hydrosphere, they're not just independent things. All of those things work together as one complete system. And if you take a look at the pictures on number 6, you had to identify 3 spheres and then say how they work together, how they interact as a system. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. All right, guys, so for number 6, here's what you had to do. You had to label 3 different spheres. Now, everybody's answers can look a little bit different here. It's important here is not that you copy my answers, that you understand how I'm getting to my answers here on number 6. Because not only for part A are you supposed to circle and label 3 different spheres, but you also have to explain how those 3 spheres, how they interact with one another. Oh, I just see the question here. It says, explain how the 3 spheres you labeled with each other. Well, it's still right there. It's in part B in the diagram, so sorry for the direction mistake right there. But let's go ahead and take a look at this. I'm going to circle 3 spheres. I have the atmosphere right here. That's the sky. I have the biosphere right here. And I'm going to call this cloud, this rain cloud, the hydrosphere. Now I have to explain how all 3 work together. And so here's what it is. The atmosphere, well, it has carbon dioxide. And these plants pull in CO2. They pull in carbon dioxide. But then that plant, the biosphere, will then kick back out oxygen for us to breathe. That's connecting the biosphere and the atmosphere. Now the hydrosphere will rain. And that rain will go down into the biosphere and help the biosphere grow. But how is the hydrosphere connected to the atmosphere? These clouds exist within the atmosphere. The atmosphere gives a place for the clouds to be. So that's how it's connected to the atmosphere. How does the biosphere give back to the hydrosphere? Well, the biosphere can evaporate water off back into the atmosphere. back into the atmosphere. So they work together as a system. None of them are sitting there by themselves. They're all connected. And if I'm going to put this into words, I can try to put it this way. Now, forgive me if I fumble around here. I'm just kind of making this up as I go along. But let's go ahead and take a look. I'll say that the atmosphere, and I'm just going to abbreviate, the atmosphere and the biosphere interact through photosynthesis. And photosynthesis is that process where the plants will take in carbon dioxide and release oxygen. And then we have the biosphere and the hydrosphere interacting, because the hydro gives water for the plants to grow. But those plants, they also evaporate water off. So it goes backwards as well. The plants put water into the atmosphere. The atmosphere and the hydrosphere are connected. They interact because the atmosphere gives a place for the clouds to be. But then also the hydrosphere gives back to the atmosphere, and that it helps regulate temperature, it helps regulate humidity. The point is this, is that all three act as a system. They're not just there by themselves. They all function together. Now let's take a look at this picture. I'm going to choose the animals as the biosphere. And here's the sky. I'm going to choose that as the atmosphere. And then we have the geosphere. The geosphere would just be the ground that's underneath the underneath the grass. It looks like it's there. Well, I don't see much of a hydrosphere. I'm sure it's here, but I'm going to make the same connections. You see, when I take a look at this biosphere and I take a look at the geosphere, well, without the geosphere, the animals wouldn't have any place to stand. So absolutely there's a connection between the biosphere and the geosphere, because without the geosphere, how are the animals going to stand anywhere? But the biosphere also gives back to the geosphere. It gives back to the geosphere in that when these animals and the grass and the trees, all these things that are a part of the biosphere die, they put nutrients back into the soil to allow the grass to grow that provides the food for the animals to eat. There's a connection between the geosphere and the biosphere. And now when we take a look, let's make a connection between the biosphere and the atmosphere. Well, the biosphere and the atmosphere are absolutely connected, the same way that you are, because we're breathing. The animals will take in oxygen, and they put out carbon dioxide. They're giving to each other. The animals are taking in the oxygen, but they're putting carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere. And then other parts of the biosphere, like the trees, will take in that carbon dioxide and put out oxygen again. They're connected. How is the geosphere and the atmosphere connected? Well, it may be less obvious because there's nothing in this picture, but one of those things that is kind of on the bubble about what belongs where are clouds. Are clouds a part of the hydrosphere or the atmosphere? And there's no one good answer to that. And that's actually a part of the previous question. That was in number 5. But we could also argue that the atmosphere, well, clouds are in the atmosphere. And because of clouds, there's rain, which then goes into the geosphere to provide the nutrients for the trees and the grass and everything else that's there. And then we could also say, and it's not obvious in this picture, but when there's evaporation, right? Well, that's hydrosphere. That's connecting into that water cycle. We didn't put the hydrosphere in here. But when there's other things, well, such as volcanic eruptions, where gases go into the atmosphere, that's the geosphere giving back. The point is that they all act as a system. They all act together. Now, I'm not going to take the time to write this out right here in that video again. But what I will do is at the end of the video, I will show you the complete answer and you can just pause it and take a look. Lastly, here's another picture. Now, an important note here. Every one of your answers could be very different from mine. There's no one good answer to this. So I'm going to go with the geosphere. That's that big volcano. I'm going to go with the atmosphere, the sky. And I'll go with the hydrosphere, the water. And we can make the connections here just like we've done before. The hydrosphere and the atmosphere. The hydrosphere evaporates water into the atmosphere. The atmosphere, which holds heat, puts heat into the hydrosphere to allow that water to evaporate and then go into the atmosphere to then form clouds later on. The hydrosphere, flowing water, can help shape that volcano through erosion. And you've seen this. You've seen water wash away rocks and minerals, or water wash away sand on a beach. Well, that happens. That's what rivers do. They're like liquid sandpaper. They help shape the land. But the geosphere also gives back to the hydrosphere. When volcanoes like this erupt, there's water within that system, and it releases water back out into the hydrosphere. And the geosphere and the atmosphere are connected. Now, earlier I said an example with a volcano, and this is a great example. Because here are some gases coming out of that volcano. So the geosphere is giving to the atmosphere. They're all connected. Every single one of them are connected. Nothing is sitting here by itself. They all act as a system together. All right, guys, here are the rest of the answers for number 6. I filled them in for part B on both the remaining diagrams. I put a lot more in here than I would have expected you to put in. I connected all the spheres as much as I could, and so you're going to see a lot more detail in here. So as long as you make basic connections, then I'm okay with that. So you could pause here and you could take a look at those answers, copy them down, do whatever you got to do. But on that quiz tomorrow, this is what you can expect. I'm going to give you a picture, and I'm going to ask you to identify some spheres, and I'm going to ask you to tell me how those spheres interact with one another, how they're connected. Then number 7 was really asking the same exact thing. When we take a look at this picture for number 7, we have the hydrosphere, geosphere, biosphere, atmosphere, and you have all these arrows connecting everything. It's all connected because it's a system. And the questions on number 7 really just asking you to come up with some ways that the geosphere may be connected to another sphere, and that the biosphere is connected to another sphere, and how the atmosphere is connected to one other sphere, and how the hydrosphere is connected to one other sphere. And you could have answered it any way you wanted. The geosphere, you could have connected it to the hydrosphere, or if you wanted to, you could have connected it to the biosphere, or if you wanted to, you could have connected it to the atmosphere. It's totally up to you. And then for the biosphere, right here in the middle, you could have connected it to any one of these other 3, the hydro, the geo, or the atmo. It's totally up to you. But I did it. I made a few connections for you to kind of help you to help drive this point across. I connected the geosphere to the hydrosphere Because I said when it rains, the rain puts nourishment to the soil, which is a part of the geosphere. The soil is a part of the solid earth. That is the geosphere. And then it helps the plants grow. So there I connected the biosphere. I connected the hydrosphere, the geosphere, and the biosphere. I only asked you to connect one, but I went ahead and connected a couple. You didn't need to connect more than one. Then for the biosphere, I put that the plants, the animals, the biosphere, when they die, they get buried and they go into the geosphere. And they put nourishment back into the soil, which is a part of the geosphere. Now, this is one where I only made one connection here for the biosphere. Then I think for the atmosphere, I made a few connections. I put clouds in the atmosphere. When it rains, it puts water back into the geosphere for plants to grow. That's the biosphere. But then I also put that water can evaporate from the plants and go back into the atmosphere. I made a connection backwards. And then in the hydrosphere, I made a lot of connections here. I said when waves, think of a lake here, like Lake Michigan. When waves at a beach, well, they wash away sand. Now, you could have ended your sentence right there, and that's okay because that's a connection between the hydrosphere and the geosphere. But I also put water from the lake also evaporates into the atmosphere. But then water in the atmosphere also rains back down into the lake and onto the beach. So we're making a connection between the atmosphere, the geosphere, and the hydrosphere. The only thing I didn't put into this one was biosphere. Guys, when you take a look at these questions, this is what would be represented on a quiz tomorrow. Specifically more for number 6 with the pictures. But I'll go back here for number 7. Here are the answers. You can pause the video. You can copy down whatever you need to copy down. But this is what you should be studying for that quiz tomorrow. Let me know if you have any questions.